They told me I couldn't get to the CEO's floor without an appointment. I smiled, clutching the bakery box I'd brought as a surprise. I'm his wife, I said. The receptionist gave me a polite, confused look. I'm sorry, she said, but Mrs. Calloway just left with him about 10 minutes ago. I am Madison Diaz, and according to the polite, confused receptionist at Calloway Equity Partners, I was not the wife who had just left the building. I stood paralyzed in the center of the Midtown Manhattan lobby, the white cardboard bakery box in my hands suddenly feeling like a prop from a different, cheaper movie. The box was warm against my palms. I was ice cold. It was supposed to be a surprise, a stupid, naive, sweet gesture. My husband, Ethan Calloway, had just closed that $200 million acquisition for the firm. His face was plastered on the cover of Wall Street Today just last week, captioned, "The New Face of Private Equity." He was a prodigy, a genius, the man who saw angles no one else did. I just wanted to be the wife who brought him his favorite cannolis from the little place in our old neighborhood, a small piece of the life we had before. This lobby was not built for cannolis. It was engineered to diminish. The ceiling soared 3 stories, a cathedral of glass and brushed steel. The air itself smelled curated, an impossibly expensive blend of sandalwood and leather that I associated with hotel bars I could not afford. The carpets were a deep, corporate blue, so thick they swallowed the sound of my own footsteps, making me feel like I was not really there. To my left, a bank of biometric scanners flashed green as executives passed through. To my right, guards in suits that cost more than my monthly paycheck stood silently. Everything was silent, polished, and hard. I felt acutely, painfully, off-brand. My blazer was a decent wool blend, a find from a high-end consignment shop 3 years ago. It was perfectly fine for my job, for the Healthway Network offices. But here, under the unforgiving glare of architectural LED lighting, it felt like a costume. My shoes were comfortable. No one in this building looked comfortable. The receptionist, Kayla, according to the sleek silver nameplate on her marble desk, was still looking at me with that practiced, customer service sympathy. It was the look you give someone whose credit card has just been declined. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the executive floors are by appointment only. Only approved guests can be sent up. That is when I had said it, my voice bright with a confidence I had not yet earned today. Oh, that's fine. I'm his wife, Ethan Calloway's. I'm surprising him for lunch. I watched her fingers tap lightly on the keyboard embedded in the desk. I saw the flicker, the subtle intake of breath, the quick, awkward glance up at my face before her eyes snapped back down to the monitor. Her shoulders tensed. Oh, she said, her professional tone slipping just a fraction. I'm sorry, Mrs. Calloway. She just left with him, about 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes. The words echoed in the cavernous space. Mrs. Calloway, not his wife, a specific title. Mrs. Calloway. My gaze drifted past her, pulled by some awful gravity, through the monolithic plate glass windows that overlooked the street. I was just in time to see it. Ethan's car, the gleaming black Range Rover, the one that was always detailed twice a week, was pulling away from the curb, and in the passenger seat, there was someone else. I could not see her face clearly, not from this distance, but the impression was instant and brutal, shiny. Perfect blonde hair pulled back into a severe, elegant twist, a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost $1,000. She was turned toward Ethan, her posture radiating the kind of effortless command that comes from expensive Pilates classes and a lifetime of being listened to. Even from 50 yards away, the way she sat in that seat, the tilt of her head, felt intimate, possessive. She belonged there. Kayla was watching me, her expression now shifting from confusion to pity. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I willed my muscles to move. I would not fall apart in the lobby of Calloway Equity Partners. Oh, goodness. I forced a light, airy laugh. It sounded brittle even to my own ears. I must have gotten the day wrong. He must be at the downtown office today. Silly me. I waved the pastry box slightly, as if this was the source of my confusion. My mistake. Thank you. I needed to get out. I needed air. I turned before she could offer any more apologies, my sensible heels making no sound on that devouring blue carpet. I walked away, feeling every eye in that lobby, real or imagined. Follow the woman with the cheap blazer and the irrelevant pastries. I did not run. I maintained the I am not shocked, just slightly flustered posture, all the way through the heavy revolving doors, into the sudden, chaotic wall of city noise, and around the corner onto the avenue. Only when I was safely hidden in the anonymous flow of the lunchtime crowd, buffeted by people rushing back to their own lives, did I let my lungs deflate in a silent gasp. I found a concrete planter and sat down, the box heavy on my lap. Mrs. Calloway. The question looped, a piece of bad code stuck in my brain. Then who the hell am I? I am Madison Diaz. I am 34 years old. I live in Harbor Heights, New Jersey, in a glass-walled house I never wanted, purchased because, as Ethan said, the address is an asset. I am a senior medical data analyst for Healthway Network. It is a nonprofit. We track immunization compliance and regional disease outbreaks. My work saves lives, actual, tangible lives, but it does not pay for sandalwood-scented lobbies. My income is stable, it is respectable, but it is a rounding error compared to Ethan's. And because of that disparity, because his job was the engine of our lives, I became the operator. I handled the mortgage payments, the landscapers, the automated grocery deliveries, the dry cleaning. I was the one who remembered his mother's birthday and sent the flowers. I was the one who stocked the fridge with the alkaline water he liked. I did the vast majority of the household labor because his time was supposedly worth more per hour. I had let my own career coast, turning down a major federal project to keep the home calendar manageable for him. The shock was physical. It felt like being submerged in ice water. I was frozen. But underneath that freeze, my mind, the part of me that Ethan never truly saw, began to work. I am an analyst. My entire career is based on one singular principle: you do not act on incomplete data. You never, ever trust the summary report. The emotional response, the wife response, was to throw these pastries at the next taxi that passed, to call his phone and scream, to drive home, pack a bag, and wait for him, armed with tears and accusations. But the analyst in me knew better. Confrontation only gives the other party time to delete the files, to cover the tracks, to change the narrative. Confrontation is an emotional release, not a strategy. Ethan thought I was the soft one, the nonprofit girl, the one who managed the house while he conquered the world. He mistook my support for simplicity, my kindness for a lack of vision. I stood up from the planter, the sounds of Midtown fading to a dull roar. I walked to the corner trash receptacle and calmly placed the white bakery box inside. The surprise was ruined. But a strategy was forming. He was running two separate lives, believing they were firewalled from each other. He had presented one wife to his world and another to me. He was wrong. My mind was already clinical. I needed data. I needed facts. I needed to see the whole truth, not just the symptom I had witnessed in that lobby. If he could build another wife in his expensive world, I could build a truth that would tear that world down. The drive back to Harbor Heights was a blur of automatic responses. I took the tunnel, not the bridge. I signaled for the correct exit. I paid the toll with the commuter pass. Ethan's accountant managed. My body understood the mechanics of the commute, the familiar groove of returning from the city. But my mind was 6 years in the past. 6 years. When Ethan and I first moved in together, we were a team. We lived in a tiny rental in Hoboken that always smelled like our neighbors' cooking. We would ride the PATH train into the city at the same time, splitting a pair of headphones, his thumb rubbing the back of my hand. We cooked dinner together, usually cheap pasta and $2 wine, and we would argue, passionately, about everything. He'd talk about market inefficiencies. I'd talk about statistical health models. We were partners. We were equals. Then the money started. His first big promotion. His move to the buy side. Then partner, now CEO. The shared commute was the first thing to go. He started leaving before the sun was up, his lips brushing my forehead in the dark. Market opens early, Maudie, he would murmur. That excuse evolved. Soon it was late call with the London office, then early prep for the Hong Kong Open. The reasons stacked up, one by one, until the new normal was an alarm buzzing at 5:15 a.m., the sound of his $1,000 Swiss espresso machine grinding beans at 5:30, and the electronic whine of the garage door closing by 6. I had not eaten breakfast with my husband on a weekday in at least 4 years. I pulled into the driveway of the house that proved it. I looked up at the facade, and for the first time, I felt not just detached from it, but repulsed by it. Our home in Harbor Heights, it was all steel beams and floor-to-ceiling glass, a stark, modernist box that looked cold even in the bright November sun. We could not afford it. I could not afford it. And at the time, we could barely afford it. When the realtor showed it to us, I looked at the mortgage calculations and nearly threw up. But Ethan, high on his first massive bonus, had swept my anxieties aside. "Maudie, listen to me," he'd said, grabbing my shoulders, his eyes bright with that ambition I used to find so intoxicating. "The address is an asset. This neighborhood is an asset. It's where the partners live. You have to look the part to be the part." I trusted him. I believed in his vision, so I signed the papers. And in doing so, I tacitly agreed to become the one who managed the impossible logistics of it all. I handled the army of contractors, the landscapers, the automated grocery deliveries, the dry cleaning, the property tax appeals. I pinched pennies from my own salary to make the monthly budget work, while his ballooning income was funneled into investments I only vaguely understood. That house, and the part I was supposed to play, cost me more than just financial peace. 2 years ago, my director at Healthway Network offered me the lead on a new federal analytics project. It was a massive opportunity, a multi-state initiative tracking opioid prescription patterns, using big data to predict community risk. It was my dream job. It would have meant travel. It would have meant late nights and high-pressure deadlines. I remember bringing it up to Ethan, my voice bubbling with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. He was looking at his phone, scrolling. He listened, nodded, and then tapped his pen on our quartz kitchen island. "This is great, babe. Really," he said, not looking up. "But who's going to manage the refinance on the house? The paperwork is due, and the firm's spring benefit is coming up. I really need you running point on that. You know I can't handle the caterers." He did not say, "You can't do it." He did not have to. He just made it clear that my ambition was inconvenient to his. My project was a scheduling conflict for his life, so I kept the home calendar. I passed on the project. I told my boss it was not the right time, citing vague personal commitments. I swallowed that sacrifice so quietly, so completely, that I almost convinced myself it was my own choice. My sister, Bianca, saw it. Bianca Cruz does not miss much. She's a public defender in the Bronx. She deals in harsh realities for a living. We were having coffee last spring, and I was complaining, mildly, about having to organize another one of Ethan's investor dinners. She just stared at me over the rim of her cup. "You're fading, Maudie," she said. Her bluntness was a weapon. "I look at you, and you're disappearing. You're becoming the beige upholstery in that glass box he bought." I bristled. The defensiveness immediate. "We're stable. B, it's a partnership. He earns, I manage. It works for us." Bianca just shook her head. Her expression one I knew well. It was the one she used when she knew her client was lying. "That's not a partnership. Maudie, that's household management. And let me tell you something I see every day, Rich. Powerful men who start to see their wives as just the home operator. That's dangerous. They start outsourcing. First the cleaning, then the intimacy, then the respect." I dismissed her warning as cynical, the baggage of her job. But even as I defended him, my mind went straight to my 33rd birthday. 2 years ago, he was supposed to take me to that new French place, The one we'd waited 3 months for a reservation at 4 p.m. He called. "Babe, I am so sorry," he'd rushed. "The Miami investors flew in. A total surprise. I have to take them out tonight. I'll make it up to you. I swear." I ate leftover pasta, alone, in our cavernous dining room. I found out a week later, through a stray Instagram tag from one of his junior analysts, that the Miami investors apparently included 2 lingerie models and a nightclub promoter. When I asked him about it, he'd laughed it off. "It's business, Mahdi. You wouldn't understand the optics." My world was Healthway Network. I built algorithms to predict flu outbreaks in low-income neighborhoods. I worked with epidemiologists. My success was measured in lives improved, in preventative care delivered, people. Ethan's world was Callaway Equity Partners. His success was measured in basis points and leverage, profit. I had accepted this divergence. I told myself I was the grounding force. I was the one keeping the home, maintaining the stability, providing the soft place to land so he could go out and slay the dragons of Wall Street. I was the infrastructure. He was the skyline. But when was the last time he did something that was just for me? Not a joint asset like the house, not a networking opportunity like the benefit, just for Madison. I sat there in the driveway, the engine off, the silence of the empty house pressing in. I had to think hard. It was 3 years ago. For our 3rd anniversary, he sent an enormous, almost laughably large bouquet of white peonies to my office at Healthway. It was so big it embarrassed me, but I loved it. I loved that he thought of me, at my office, in my world. Since then, romance had become transactional. He transferred money into the joint account every month. He sent texts. "Great job on the dinner. Thanks for handling the insurance. Order whatever you want for dinner." The gestures were replaced by permissions. The connection was replaced by delegation. The cold realization from the lobby, the shock that had frozen my lungs, finally settled into my bones. This was not just about another woman. This was not a simple, messy, passionate affair. This was a corporate replacement. He had not just cheated on me, he had downgraded me. He had reduced me from a partner to a household utility. He kept me here in Harbor Heights, the quiet, reliable, sensible nonprofit wife, while he apparently cultivated another Mrs. Callaway for his real life in Midtown, a wife who matched the sandalwood-scented lobby and the cream-colored silk blouses. I had made myself small for so long to fit into the spaces he left for me. I had quieted my own ambitions, managed his home, absorbed his excuses, all in the name of stability. I got out of the car. The analyst in me was fully awake now, the grief and shock crystallizing into something cold and sharp. My professional motto, the one I drilled into every junior analyst who came through my department, was simple. If the data does not match the story, you do not fix the data, you fix the story. And the story I had been telling myself about my marriage was a lie. It was time to find the real one. I did not go into the house. I could not face the glass walls, the empty, perfect kitchen. I sat in the driveway of my own home, the engine of the Subaru ticking as it cooled, the silence amplifying the scream in my head. My hands were perfectly steady. I reached for my phone, my movements precise, analytical. Years ago, after I'd gotten trapped on a stalled subway car for 2 hours, Ethan had insisted we install a location-sharing app. "It's just for safety. Mahdi," he'd said, his voice full of that earnest concern I'd loved. "So I always know you're okay." A digital leash, gilded with the word safety. I almost never looked at his location. I trusted him. I tapped the icon. His little blue dot, labeled Ethan, pulsed on the map. It was not at the Callaway Equity Partners building on Park Avenue. It was 6 blocks south and 2 avenues west. The label on the screen read 1142. I knew the name. We all did. It was the newest, most obscenely expensive Eastern Mediterranean restaurant. The kind of place where billionaires ate $50 hummus and the wine list started at $400 a bottle. I checked my digital calendar, the one I meticulously managed for both of us. His entry for 1 p.m. read, "Lunch, Fund Legal Team." The fund's legal team was Arthur Fincher, a 70-year-old man who wore suspenders and ate pastrami on rye at his desk. Arthur did not go to 1742. My decision was instant. The wife in me was paralyzed, but the analyst was already in motion. I put the car in reverse. I drove back through the tunnel, my old Subaru feeling like a ghost among the black Escalades and Teslas carving up the highway. The car was 12 years old, paid off, and utterly invisible. It was my car, from my old life, and today, it was my camouflage. I found a multi-level parking garage directly across the street from the restaurant. I paid the attendant for 2 hours, took the paper ticket, and wound my way up to the second level. I found a dark corner spot, angled perfectly, offering a clear diagonal view of the restaurant's heavy bronze doors. I reclined the driver's seat just enough to look casual. I put my phone on the dashboard mount and pressed play on a podcast about historical data visualization. If a security guard walked by, I was just another suburbanite, killing time before a dental appointment, listening to something boring. My eyes never left those bronze doors. I watched men in handmade suits and women in sharp architectural dresses arrive, handing off keys to the swarm of valets. I waited for 45 minutes. The dregs of my morning coffee, bought hours ago from my cheap New Jersey deli, were cold and acidic. My bladder ached. At exactly 14:15, 2:15 in the afternoon, the doors opened. My breath caught. There he was, Ethan. He looked incredible. Of course, his charcoal suit was immaculate, his posture radiating the easy, athletic confidence of a man who had never been told no. And beside him was her, the blonde woman, the one from the lobby, the one who was Mrs. Calloway. She was laughing at something he'd said. Her head tilted back. She wore a severe, sleeveless gray sheath dress that I knew, instinctively, cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She looked polished, hard, and expensive. She looked like she belonged with him. They paused at the curb, waiting for their car. He was smiling at her. It was not his public smile, the one for the cameras. It was his private one, the one he used to use on me, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes, the one that said, "You and I are the only people in the room." A black sedan, sleek and anonymous, pulled up. The valet, holding the rear door, said, "Your car, Ms. Pierce." Ms. Pierce, the name slotted into place with a sickening click. Lauren Pierce. I had seen her name on corporate press releases. She was the senior director of communications for Callaway Equity, the woman in charge of crafting Ethan's public image. Ethan moved forward, and then he did it, the gesture that vaporized the last molecule of denial. He placed his hand on the small of her back, just above the curve of her hip. His fingers splayed slightly. It was not a polite, collegial touch. It was not, "after you." It was a touch of possession, a touch that said, "This is mine." She slid into the car. He bent down, leaning in close, and said something that made her smile that intimate, shared smile again. He shut the door. I expected him to walk back toward his office. I expected her to drive off. Instead, he walked around the back of the sedan and got into the passenger seat. They were not going back to work. My heart was a fist, hammering the inside of my chest. I started the Subaru before their car even merged with traffic, my movements purely instinctive. I kept 2 cars and a yellow cab between us. My hands were damp on the plastic steering wheel. They drove 5 blocks west, then turned south, away from the financial district. The sedan signaled, pulling into the discreet, ivy-covered entrance of the Marlowe. My stomach turned to acid. The Marlowe. It was not a tourist hotel. It was a boutique business hotel, fiercely private, all dark wood and unspoken agreements. It was where deals were signed off the books, and where men like Ethan took women who were not their wives. I drove past the entrance, my mind racing. I found a public lot on the next block and parked the Subaru. The wife in me, the one who had been betrayed, wanted to storm the lobby. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw keys and make accusations. She wanted to see the look on his face. But the analyst knew better. A public confrontation is an emotional outburst. It gives the guilty party the narrative. She's hysterical. She's crazy. Data is not hysterical. Data is cold. Data is the truth. I needed the truth. I got out of my car. I smoothed my blazer. I ran my fingers through my hair. I walked into the lobby of the Marlowe. It was exactly as I'd pictured low lighting. Hushed jazz. The smell of old money and leather. I saw them. They were standing by the brushed steel elevator bank, waiting. Her back was to me, but Ethan was facing my direction. His head bent toward her, listening intently. I did not look at them. I walked directly to the front desk, forcing a bright, slightly flustered smile. A young man in a perfectly tailored suit looked up. "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" "Oh, hi, yes. I'm so turned around," I said, my voice airy, a perfect imitation of a harmless woman. "I'm supposed to be meeting my group. I think it's in the Hudson conference room. Am I in the right place?" He gave me that polite, professional smile. "Let me check that for you, ma'am." His eyes went to his monitor. He tapped a few keys. As he did, my gaze drifted past him, scanning his workspace, and I saw it, on his main check-in screen, minimized but not hidden, was the active guest log. My eyes are trained to find patterns, to pull signal from noise. I found his name in less than half a second. E. Calloway, day use, room 708, day use, not overnight, not suite. A room rented for a few hours in the middle of a Wednesday. Room 708. The receptionist looked back up at me, his expression unchanged. "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we don't have a Hudson conference room in this hotel. Are you perhaps thinking of the Marlin Hotel that's on the next block?" His calmness was the final piece of evidence. He was not surprised to see the name E. Calloway on his screen. This was not a new reservation. This was not an anomaly. This was a pattern. This was routine. "Oh, goodness, you must be right," I said, the cheerfulness in my voice making me sick. "Silly me. Thank you so much for your help." I turned and walked out, my sensible shoes silent on the plush rug. I did not look back at the elevators. I did not need to. I made it back to my car, back to the gray, anonymous concrete of the parking garage. I shut the door, and the sound of the latch clicking into place felt final. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking now, a violent, delayed tremor. I opened the camera. I took a photo of the parking receipt, clearly showing the time and date. I opened the encrypted drive I used for my most sensitive patient data, the one protected by multi-factor authentication. I created a new folder. I uploaded the photo. I typed a single, clinical note. Levantine, 42-14-15. The Marlowe, 1430. Day use, room 708. I sat there, gripping the wheel, and I finally let myself think. I thought about the 6 years I had spent organizing his life, the 6 years of cooking meals, and scheduling his dental appointments, and folding his shirts, and arranging his collection of silk ties by color. The 6 years I had spent making my own life smaller so his could be bigger. I had been operating under the illusion that I was his partner. I was wrong. I was his household manager. And he had just promoted Lauren Pierce to the position he'd made vacant. He had replaced me with a newer, sleeker, more expensive version, one who matched his new, expensive life. The tears that finally came were not hot with grief. They were ice-cold with rage. I was not just a wife who had been cheated on. I was an analyst who had been lied to, and my job was just beginning. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat as I pulled onto the empty tree-lined street of my own neighborhood. I did not need to look at it. I knew the vibration, the specific short buzz I had set for his texts. The message was a formality, a piece of pre-written code in the program of our marriage. I pulled into the dark driveway, the glass walls of the house reflecting the headlights back at me, and only then did I read the screen. "Hey, today's strategy session is running long. Don't wait up for dinner." He was in room 708, running a strategy session with Lauren Pierce. The lie was so casual, so effortless. It confirmed what I already knew. This was not a lapse in judgment. This was standard operating procedure. I let myself into the cold, silent house. The kitchen island gleamed under the track lighting. The minimalist furniture Ethan had picked out sat in the dark, looking sterile and uninviting. I did not turn on the main lights. I walked to his office. The door was locked. He had started locking it about a year ago. Investor sensitivities, Mahdi, he had explained, his tone patient, as if explaining something complex to a child. SEC compliance. We're a private firm. The data is everything. You understand. I always understood. I always respected the boundary. I was the good, understanding wife. I went to our master bedroom, to his custom-built closet, a room larger than my first apartment. I did not go for his safe. I went for his dresser, a massive block of dark mahogany that smelled of his cologne and cedar. I slid open the top drawer, the one that held his accessories. There it was, a velvet-lined mahogany box for his cufflinks. I lifted the tray, the one holding the heavy silver knots I'd given him for our 3rd anniversary. And there, taped to the wooden bottom of the box, was a small, silver key, the key to his locked filing cabinet. I walked back to the office. The lock on the door itself was simple. He kept a spare in the kitchen junk drawer, labeled "Study" in his precise, angled handwriting. A key he assumed I had forgotten existed. I had not. The lock on the door clicked open. I stepped inside. The room was his sanctuary. Dark wood, leather, a massive, polished desk. The air was still. I used the flashlight on my phone, the beam cutting through the darkness. I did not touch the light switch. I walked to the sleek, 4-drawer steel filing cabinet, the one he claimed held only the portfolios of his most sensitive clients. I used the key from the cufflink box. The top drawer slid open with a well-oiled, expensive shush. It was exactly what he said it was, neatly labeled hanging folders for fund performance. SEC compliance, investor reports. I ran my fingers along the tabs, and in the very back, behind a thick folder labeled taxes, personal, was a plain, unmarked manila folder. My heart was not pounding. It was cold. It felt like a piece of machinery. I lifted the folder. Inside were credit card statements. They were not for our joint account. They were not for his corporate card, the one the firm paid for. They were for an American Express Platinum card, in his name only, mailed to a PO box at a postal center in Midtown. I laid the first statement on his desk, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the lines of text. My other hand held my phone. The camera app open. I took a photo. Click. I took another. Click. The charges told the story. The Marlowe. The Marlowe. The Marlowe. It was a drumbeat. 2 or 3 times a month. Every month. A charge for a day-use room. I kept turning the pages, going backward in time. My hands were perfectly steady. I found the first one, 2.5 years ago. September. A single charge. The beginning. Then, a new entry. From last month. Maison de Clara Jewelry, Soho. Charge $6,500. $6,500. My birthday was last month. He had handed me a gift card to a spa in our suburb. "You've been so stressed, babe," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "Get yourself a massage." I had never owned a single piece of jewelry that cost even 1/10 of that. I felt a sudden, sharp pain, an insult that cut deeper than the infidelity. He was buying her gifts, real gifts, while he handed me a coupon for a back rub. I photographed every single page. Then I sat down in his $1,000 leather chair. I opened the encrypted folder on my phone, the one I used for work, and I began to build the timeline. I was an analyst. This was my language. I opened our shared digital calendar. I cross-referenced every single charge from the secret statements. Date September 4th. Charge the Marlowe, $320. My calendar entry for Ethan. Late call with London office, 8 p.m. Date October 9th. Charge the Marlowe, $320. My calendar. Ethan, dinner with legal team. Date October 16th. Charge Maison de Clara Jewelry. $6, $500. My calendar. Maddie's 34th birthday. Dinner TBD. He had canceled. The Miami investors. The timeline was a brutal, clinical revelation, 2.5 years of lies, documented in perfect chronological order. I was about to put the folder back when I paused. I looked at the desk. I opened the deep bottom drawer on the left, the one he used for old electronics and manuals. Beneath a stack of warranty pamphlets for monitors, I saw it. An old Android phone, a cheap, burner-style model, not the gleaming, top-of-the-line iPhone he used every day. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, illuminating my face in the dark. A lock screen, a 4-digit passcode. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed his birthday. Incorrect passcode. I typed his mother's birthday. Incorrect passcode. I typed the firm's founding year. Incorrect passcode. I stopped. A cold, bitter realization settled over me. I took a breath, and then I typed our wedding date. The phone unlocked. The arrogance of it, the sickening, cruel irony. He was using the very symbol of our marriage to protect the logistics of its destruction. There was almost nothing on the phone, only one app, a high-encryption messaging client. I opened it. There were only 2 contacts in the chat log. L and E. I started at the bottom and scrolled up, my phone in my other hand, the camera silently capturing every single screen. It was all there, the logistics of their parallel life. L booked for Wednesday at 1. E, perfect. Just come straight to the 41st floor. They know you. E landing in Miami. Meet you at the hotel. L. Can't wait. Glad Maddie isn't the traveling type. Then, the photos, selfies, Ethan and Lauren Pierce, clinking champagne glasses on a sun-drenched hotel balcony, the Miami skyline glittering behind them. The trip, he told me, was a roadshow with a university fund. His arm was wrapped tightly around her waist. Her head was resting on his shoulder. They looked happy. They looked like a couple. I scrolled up, my thumb numb, until I found the most recent exchange. From last week, the one that stopped my heart cold. It was from Ethan. From EE. Once the board approves the GDK media transfer to your oversight, it'll be easier to go public. We just have to be patient. Lauren's reply. And what about Maddie? I watched the screen, my own reflection staring back at me. His reply appeared a moment later. E. Maddie won't make a fuss. She needs the house. She needs the house. That was it. That was all I was. Not his partner, not his wife. I was a dependent, a tenant, a line item on his balance sheet, one he could easily manage because I was too weak, too reliant, too stupid to fight back. He had not just betrayed me. He had calculated my submission. I did not cry. I did not smash the phone. My movements became even more precise. I methodically photographed the last of the messages. I backed out of the app. I cleared its cache from the phone's memory. I powered the phone down. I took the microfiber cloth he kept for his monitor and wiped the phone clean of any print, polishing it until it shined. I placed it back under the manuals, exactly as I had found it. I stacked the credit card statements. I put them back in the manila folder. I placed the folder behind the taxes file. I pushed the drawer shut. I turned the key. The lock clicked, soft and final. I went to the closet. I lifted the velvet cufflink tray, taped the key back to the bottom, and placed the silver knots on top, just as they had been. I walked out of his office, locked the door with the spare key, and returned that key to the back of the kitchen junk drawer. Beneath the old warranties and rubber bands, I left no trace. I was a ghost in my own home. He thought I was too quiet, too simple, too nice to ever look at the numbers. He forgot what I do for a living. He thought my world was all soft feelings and nonprofit ideals. He thought I was too sweet to look at the data. But data is my native language, and I was now fluent in his. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in compartmentalization. I went to work. I sat in my cubicle at Healthway Network, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I ran the predictive models on the West Nile virus outbreak in Passaic County. I nodded in meetings. I drank burnt coffee from the break room. And in between spreadsheets, I conducted the most important analysis of my life. I did not Google divorce lawyer. That was for amateurs. That was for the emotionally compromised. I searched legal databases. I looked up case law involving high-asset, private equity divorces in the state of New York. I cross-referenced the attorneys who represented the wives. I was not looking for a fighter. I was looking for a killer. One name kept appearing, attached to the most brutal, most effective, and most lucrative settlements for the non-moneyed spouse. Vivian Marsh. She did not have a flashy website. She did not have billboards on the turnpike. Her firm, Marsh Legal, was listed at an address in the Upper East Side, a place I had only ever walked through as a tourist. I used my lunch break to call from a public payphone 3 blocks from my office. A relic I was surprised still worked. A crisp, cool voice answered on the second ring. I gave my name. I said, "I am the wife of Ethan Callaway, CEO of Callaway Equity Partners, and I need to schedule a consultation regarding a high-asset divorce action." The silence on the other end was brief, but heavy. "Ms. Diaz," the voice said, "Mrs. Marsh can see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bring your last 2 years of financial statements and a retainer of $10,000. Do not bring your husband." The line clicked dead. The next day, I left work early, claiming a migraine. I took the train into the city, but this time, I did not go to Midtown. I took the subway uptown, to the quiet, tree-lined streets of the Upper East Side. The address was not an office building. It was a renovated brownstone, its limestone facade clean and impossibly elegant. There was no sign, only a small, discreet brass plaque next to the polished black door, Marsh Legal. I was buzzed in. The interior was not a legal office. It was a fortress. The floors were herringbone wood, the walls a deep, calming gray, the art abstract and expensive. It was silent, save for the quiet tapping of a keyboard from a room I could not see. Vivian Marsh was waiting for me in a corner office that looked more like a Park Avenue study. She was perhaps 60, rail-thin, with silver hair pulled into a severe chignon. She wore a dark purple sheath dress that screamed bespoke, and a single, heavy gold bracelet. She did not smile. She did not offer coffee. She gestured to one of the 2 leather chairs facing her enormous, clean desk. "Ms. Diaz," she said, her voice the same one from the phone. "You have 1 hour. What do you have for me?" I did not cry. I did not stumble over my words. I had spent the entire night preparing. I opened my briefcase, the one I took to my non-profit job every day. I took out a simple, black, 1 terabyte external hard drive, the one I used for my data backups. "I am a medical data analyst," I said, my voice steady. "When I discovered my husband was having an affair, I began my own data collection." I pushed the drive across her desk. "On this drive, you will find a password-protected folder. Inside, you will find 3 subfolders." Vivian watched me, her expression unreadable, her hands steepled under her chin. "Folder 1 is Financials," I continued. "It contains 6 years of our joint tax returns, 2.5 years of statements from an undisclosed American Express card, and a cross-reference timeline. The timeline correlates his business expenses from that card with our shared calendar. You will note itemized charges for day-use rooms at the Marlowe Hotel, 2 to 3 times per month, all corresponding to his fabricated late meetings or legal dinners." Vivian's eyebrow raised, just a fraction of an inch. "You will also find a receipt for a jewelry purchase from Maison de Clara in Soho for $6,500, made last month. I did not receive it." Folder 2 is Communications. It contains 412 screenshots from a secondary phone he kept hidden. The chats are between my husband and his senior director of communications, Lauren Pierce. They detail the logistics of their affair, their travel together on his business trips, and their plan to, in his words, go public after he secured a media transfer for her. Folder 3 is Personal. It contains photos, the selfies from the burner phone, a photo of the check-in screen at the Marlowe I took yesterday, and photos of the empty receptionist desk in his lobby, after I was told Mrs. Calloway had already left with him. I finished. The silence in the room was absolute. Vivian Marsh leaned forward. She plugged the drive into her computer. She typed in the password I gave her. For 5 solid minutes, she did not speak. She just scrolled, her mouse clicking with quiet, sharp precision. Finally, she leaned back, and for the first time, a small, tight smile touched her lips. "Ms. Diaz, Madison," she said. "You have not just collected evidence, you have compiled a case. You've done the work of a forensic accountant. Most wives come in here with tears and text messages. You've brought me a balance sheet of his betrayal." She swiveled in her chair. "This is not a negotiation. This is a targeted strike. Your evidence of the affair is clear. But in New York, that just gets you the divorce. The money, Madison, is in this." She tapped the screen, pointing to the Amex statements. "Dissipation of marital assets. He used communal funds to finance his affair. The trips, the jewels, the hotel rooms. We will claw back every single dollar, with interest." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp and assessing. "So, I ask all my clients this, and I need a clear answer. What do you want? Do you want the house? Do you want half his money? Or do you want to see him lose face?" I met her gaze. The wife who had carried cannolis to Midtown was gone. "I want the house," I said. "And I want the money I am owed. But more than that, I want the world he is proudest of. The one he built at Callaway Equity. The one he used to humiliate me. I want it to be the thing that pays." Vivian nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "A clear objective." She made a note on a legal pad. "We will need more. My investigators will run a full background on him, on Ms. Pierce. We need to know his true net worth, not the one he shows you." She held up a hand. "He's a private equity CEO, which means his money is hidden, offshore accounts, shell corporations, trust vehicles. He will start moving assets the second he is served. We cannot warn him. You must go home and you must play the part of the devoted, ignorant wife." "Can you do that?" "I've been doing it for 2 days," I said. "I can continue?" Good. The report from Vivian's investigator came 3 days later, via a secure email. It was worse, and better, than I could have imagined. Ethan Callaway. It turned out, had a history, 8 years ago. Just before he founded Callaway Equity, he had been engaged to a woman named Alexandra Holt. The engagement was abruptly, publicly canceled. The investigator had found 2 of their wedding guests. The reason Alexandra had discovered Ethan was sleeping with a junior colleague. He did not just cheat. He had a pattern. He found a partner, used them for stability while he built the next phase of his career, and simultaneously cultivated their replacement from inside his own professional world. I was not the love of his life. I was just the next iteration in his serial upgrade. That night, I went online. I opened a new, high-interest checking account at the New Jersey Public Employees Credit Union, an institution with no branches in New York and no affiliation with any major bank. I set the statements to paperless. The email to a new, private address. I started small. I rerouted my entire paycheck from Healthway to the new account. Then, I logged into the joint household account, the one I managed. I made a small payment of $300 to an old, defunct student loan account I kept open. But the payment was not routed to the loan. It was routed to my new credit union account. I set up a recurring payment, $300, every Tuesday. It was an anomaly too small for him to ever notice in a budget of thousands. It was my escape fund. I left Vivian Marsh's office that first day feeling something I had not felt since I stood in that lobby power. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. They had been replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was no longer the wife who had been betrayed. I was no longer a victim. I was a plaintiff. I had a strategy, and I had the best lawyer in New York. Vivian's final words to me as I left her brownstone echoed in my head. I had asked her when we would file, when we would serve the papers. She had smiled that thin, sharp smile. "Not yet," she'd said. "You don't strike when the target is comfortable. You don't strike when he's at home. We will choose the moment he is at his most powerful. We will choose the place where his reputation is most valuable. We will wait until he is standing in front of everyone he wants to impress, and we will prove that the higher he stands, the further he has to fall." Living with the data was a strange existence. I performed the role of Madison Diaz. Wife, I made his morning smoothie. I asked about his day, my face arranged in the appropriate expression of mild interest. I listened to his monologues about market fluctuations and problematic funds. I slept next to him in our king-sized bed, my body rigid, my skin crawling every time his arm brushed against me in the night. I was an analyst, running a simulation. The simulation was my marriage. About 2 weeks into this new, silent reality, he brought up the summit. He announced it over dinner, a meal I had cooked, his eyes on his iPad, not on me. "The Investor Luxury Summit is in 3 weeks, he said, tapping his fork. "It's at the Crestline Manhattan. 3 days. All our biggest family funds and a few billionaires are flying in. It's the most important event of our year." I knew this. He had been complaining about the logistics for a month. My mind instantly went to the burner phone. What should I wear for the Crestline dinner? Want to match? This was her event. This was the stage they were building together. I set my own fork down, arranging my face into a mask of supportive, slightly neglected, wifely interest. "Ethan, that sounds amazing," I said, my voice soft. "Actually, I've been thinking." He grunted, still scrolling. "I'd really love to come with you this year," I said. His hand stopped. The scrolling ceased. He looked up at me, his eyes sharpening, his expression a perfect blank I had learned to read as panic. "You to the summit." I smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "I just feel so disconnected from your world," I said, letting a small, false vulnerability seep into my tone. "You're doing these incredible things, like that $200 million deal, and I'm over here tracking flu season in Jersey. I just want to understand your world better. I want to be a part of it, like we used to be." He was visibly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "Madi, it's not a +1 kind of thing. It's 3 days of back-to-back meetings, breakout sessions on derivative markets. You'd be bored out of your mind." "I don't mind," I said, my smile unwavering. "I can read a book by the hotel pool, but I'd love to be there for the opening night gala. I'd love to finally meet the people you talk about." I let my voice drop. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. I'd like to be seen with you." He was trapped. How does the prodigy CEO tell his supportive nonprofit wife that she cannot come to his work event because he has already penciled in his mistress for the role? "Of course," he said, the words coming out too slowly. "That's great, babe. Yes, the opening night. You should definitely come." "I can't wait," I said, and I went back to eating my chicken. The night of the summit. I did not dress for Ethan. I did not dress to be the sensible wife. I took the emergency credit card he had given me for household disasters, and I went to a boutique in Soho that I had only ever window shopped at. I chose a dress that was the opposite of my life. It was a simple, severe, floor-length column of black silk. It had no embellishments. It did not ask for attention. It demanded it. I had my hair pulled back into a sleek, severe chignon, identical to the style Lauren Pierce had worn. I did my makeup with a precision I usually reserved for data charts, a sharp, cat eyeliner, and a bold, blood-red lipstick. When I met Ethan at the entrance to the Crestline's grand ballroom, his jaw literally tightened. I did not look like the woman who managed his dry cleaning. I did not look like Madi who needs the house. "Wow," he said, his eyes scanning me with an expression I could not quite place. It was not just appreciation, it was alarm. "You look incredible." "Thank you," I said, and I looped my arm through his. "Let's go in." The ballroom was grotesque in its opulence. It was a sea of dark suits and glittering jewelry. The air hummed with the sound of quiet. Powerful voices striking quiet. Powerful deals. And the second we entered, I felt the ripple. Ethan was a star in this world. People turned to him immediately, their hands outstretched, and their eyes, expecting to see the familiar blonde communications director at his side, flickered when they saw me. I saw the discreet glances, the subtle nudges. I saw two men in tuxedos look directly from me to Lauren Pierce, who was standing, as predicted, by the massive central bar, holding a champagne flute like a scepter. The first introduction was to a man Ethan revered, a fossil who ran a $10 billion family office. "Arthur, so good to see you," Ethan boomed, all charm. "I want you to meet someone. This is my wife, Madison." The man's eyes widened. Just for a second, he recovered quickly, taking my hand. "His wife a pleasure." "Ethan, you've been holding out on us." I saw him glance over Ethan's shoulder at Lauren. The message was clear. We all thought she was the one. A wave of quiet, awkward understanding spread through the room. Lauren Pierce, the woman who had been gliding through these events as the de facto Mrs. Calloway, was suddenly, visibly, just a staff member. I played the part. I was charming. I was quiet. I smiled and nodded. I let Ethan do the talking. But I watched. I spotted Grant Holloway, the firm's chief operating officer. Grant and his wife had come to our house for dinner once, years ago. He was a decent, nervous man who always seemed slightly overwhelmed by Ethan. I drifted over to him. "Grant, how lovely to see you," I said. "Madison," he stammered, his eyes darting to Ethan, then to Lauren, then back to me. He could not hold my gaze. This is a surprise. I didn't know you were coming." "I'm trying to understand Ethan's world a little more," I said softly. "It's all very impressive." Yes, it is," he said, wiping a trace of sweat from his upper lip, despite the room being cool. "Ethan, he's a force. And Lauren," he added, his voice dropping. "She's done wonders for our media profile. Wonders." He was warning me. He was telling me, in his own cowardly way, that he knew, and he was terrified of Lauren's power over the company's image, and by extension, his own career. He was on their side, not because he liked them, but because he was scared. Later, we were seated for dinner at a massive round table with two of the firm's biggest investors and their wives, and Lauren, she had been seated at the same table, a deliberate move by Ethan. I was sure, to manage the optics. She was on his other side, a perfect corporate bookend. She was furious. Her smiles were brittle, her posture rigid. During a lull in the conversation, as the waiters cleared the appetizer plates, I leaned forward, my expression one of polite, naive curiosity. I looked directly at Lauren. "Lauren, it's so nice to finally meet you properly," I said, my voice carrying just enough for the table to hear. "I hear you're at the headquarters in Midtown quite often." Her smile was a slash of red, matching my own. "I am Madison. My team is on the 41st floor. Communications is a 24/7 job." "Oh, I'm sure," I said, my tone full of sympathy. "Ethan's schedule is just relentless. It must be so hard for him, having to be in so many meetings. I can barely keep track." The subtext hung in the air, thick and toxic. The investors' wives exchanged a look. Lauren's knuckles were white on the stem of her wine glass. "Ethan is a very hands-on CEO," she said, her voice tight. "He believes in full oversight." "I'm sure he does," I said, and I gave her the sweetest, most understanding smile I could muster. Ethan was seething. I could feel the heat radiating from him. As soon as the main course was finished, before dessert was served, he stood up and put his hand on my arm. "Madison, darling, would you excuse us for a moment? I need to borrow my wife." He pulled me, his grip just a little too tight, through a side door into a blessedly empty carpeted service corridor. The second the door clicked shut, His charm evaporated. His face was dark red. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice a low growl. I feigned perfect, wounded ignorance. What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," he snapped. "Asking Lauren those questions, talking to Grant, you're making things awkward. Madison, you're making my senior staff uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. I let my voice waver, as if I were about to cry. I was just making conversation, Ethan. I was just trying to be involved, like you're always telling me to be. I was just trying to be a good wife. I looked up at him, my eyes wide. I just wanted it to be like the old days, like when you used to be proud of me, like when you used to send flowers to my office. The dig hit him. He flinched. He had no defense against that, against the memory of the man he used to be. He stared at me, his jaw working. He was seeing a version of me he did not recognize, and it was throwing him off his script. Before he could respond, the door opened, and one of the investors from our table, the billionaire from Texas, stuck his head out. "Ah, there you two are, Ethan. My wife insists on a photo before we leave. Madison, you look stunning. Sweetheart, we need to capture this." Ethan's face snapped back into his public mask. "Of course, Arthur, right behind you." He put his hand on my back, the one that had held Lauren Pierce just hours ago, the one that had rested on her hip at the Marlowe. He guided me back into the ballroom, back to the table. Arthur's wife, a woman dripping in diamonds, stood next to me. Arthur stood next to Ethan. The flash went off, and as the light popped, I glanced across the table. Lauren Pierce was watching us. Her face was a perfect, beautiful mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She was watching me, the real wife, stake my claim. She was watching me, in my black dress, stand in the spot that she had convinced herself was hers. In that moment, I understood what Vivian Marsh had meant. In this world, the title of wife was not about love. It was about public image. It was about stability. It was about shareholder confidence. It was a brand asset. And I was the one who legally owned it. I had just reminded everyone in this room of that fact. Ethan kept his hand on my back for the rest of the night. It felt like a branding iron. The high of the summit evaporated the moment I walked back into the Harbor Heights house. The performance was over. The preparation phase had begun. That night, while Ethan slept, breathing the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who believes he has won, I went back into his office. This was not a recon mission. It was an audit. I used the key from the junk drawer and the key from the cufflink box. I was no longer interested in the Amex statements. I was interested in the assets. I pulled the thick folder labeled Harbor Heights, inside the deed, the mortgage agreement, the appraisal, all jointly owned. Then, the folder for the cars, the lease agreement for the black Range Rover. It was not a joint asset. It was a corporate lease through Callaway Equity Partners, listed as a business expense, a perk for the CEO. I found the life insurance policies. He had two. One, a standard $2 million policy, listed me, Madison Diaz, as the sole beneficiary. The second, a newer, larger $5 million policy, listed the Callaway Family Trust as the beneficiary. I photographed the trust number. I found the file he'd bragged to me about once, the one he called his golden handcuffs, the paperwork for his preferred shares in Callaway Equity, the private stock options that would make him a billionaire, not just a millionaire. If the company ever went public, I photographed every single page, every vesting schedule, every obscure clause. I worked until 4 a.m. The only light coming from the glow of my phone, I uploaded every image to a new, encrypted drive, one Vivian had set up for me, accessible only through a specialized privacy browser. My isolation was the hardest part. I was the keeper of a secret that was eating me alive, and I had to pretend everything was normal. My mother called on Saturday, as she always did. Her voice, warm and familiar, felt like a betrayal. "Mommy, I'm fine," I lied. "You sound tired, mija," she insisted, that maternal sixth sense cutting through the line. "Estás estresada. Is Ethan working you too hard? You tell him your family needs you. 2. It's just work. Mommy, I said, the lie tasting like ash. Just a big project at Healthway. I could not tell her, to her, from her generation, from our Latin family. You did not break a marriage. You fixed it. You endured. You prayed. Telling her would not bring me support. It would bring me a chorus of try harder and be a better wife. My sister was a different story. Bianca met me for coffee at a diner in Jersey City, halfway between our worlds. She took one look at me, and her public defender mask snapped on. You look like hell. Maudie, she said, skipping the pleasantries. And you've lost 10 pounds. What is he doing? I tried the same lie. Work is just... Stop, she cut me off. Don't work me. I've seen this look. It's the look my clients have when their man is running a second life. What is it? I looked at my sister, my oldest friend, and the isolation was so heavy I nearly broke, but I could not yet. B, I said, my voice low and urgent. I can't, not now, but soon. Please, just trust me. She searched my face, her eyes sharp. Are you in danger? No, I said, shaking my head. I am the danger, but I need you to just wait. I need him not to see this coming. I need him comfortable. Bianca nodded slowly, the strategist in her recognizing the one in me. Okay, she said, her voice hard. But you call me the second you're ready, and Maudie, use the apartment. The apartment was our old contingency plan, a small one-bedroom rental in Jersey City, high in a nondescript building with good security. Bianca had kept the lease for years under her name, just in case one of her clients needed a safe place to land for a night. It was currently empty. That afternoon, I started moving. I took a box of winter sweaters I planned to donate. I took my passport, my social security card, my birth certificate. I took the few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had left me. I packed a go bag with 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, and $1,500 in cash I'd pulled from the joint account, marked as holiday shopping. I stored it all in the back of the apartment's empty bedroom closet. I was erasing my essential self from his house. The legal hammer fell the following Tuesday. I received a secure message from Vivian Marsh. Call me. I stepped outside my office at Healthway, walking into the biting November wind. He's hiding it, Madison. Vivian's voice was cold, precise. My investigator found it, a short-term irrevocable trust, established in Delaware 6 months ago. The money trail is muddy, but the timing is perfect. He funded it right after the $200 million deal closed, and the monthly disbursements, they matched the exact dates of his jewelry purchases for Ms. Pierce and 2 luxury travel charges we couldn't identify. What does it mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means he's not just spending marital assets. He's actively, methodically hiding them. This is not carelessness. This is intent. This is malice. He's planning to leave you, and he's building his nest egg first. I hung up the phone, the rage a pure, clean, cold fuel. He was not just cheating, he was liquidating my future. That night, I set the final trap. He came home late, past 10 p.m. He smelled faintly of perfume, the same expensive sandalwood scent from his lobby, the one I now associated with Lauren. He was arrogant, still high from the success of the summit. I, in turn, played the role of the insecure, slightly needy wife, the one he expected. I sat on the edge of the bed as he loosened his tie. You've been seeing Lauren Pierce a lot, haven't you? I asked, my voice small. At the summit, you two seemed so close. It made me feel stupid. He sighed, the impatient sound of a man burdened by an emotional wife. He unbuttoned his shirt. Maudie, don't start. Lauren is just someone I'm helping, a colleague. I'm mentoring her. She's critical to the GDK media transition. Don't be dramatic. It's just business. You wouldn't understand. But as he spoke, my phone was on the nightstand, hidden by a book. The voice memo app was running. I had it. His direct lie, recorded, proof that he had actively deceived me, his wife, about the nature of his relationship. It was not just cheating. It was fraud. I began my final log. In my encrypted file, I created a new entry. Wednesday. I tracked the pattern, every Wednesday, at 1 p.m., the firm's visitor logs, which I had convinced a gullible IT intern to give me access to under the guise of planning a surprise party for Ethan, showed Lauren Pierce arriving. Every Wednesday, at 1:15 p.m., Ethan's shared calendar would suddenly populate with a private strategy hold for 3 hours. Every Wednesday, he would work late. It was their day. The Marlowe, room 708, their routine. The preparation was the worst part. The knowledge was a physical weight. I had to lie in our bed. His bed. Every night, I had to let him touch me. One night, energized by his success, he rolled over and initiated. I had to perform the role of wife, my skin crawling, my mind miles away in a Jersey City apartment, my entire being focused on the timeline. I dissociated, my mind clicking through spreadsheets, while he used my body. I cried in the shower the next morning, the water scalding hot, washing away the evidence of my own sacrifice. Then, finally, the call came. It was a Monday afternoon. I was at my desk, analyzing immunization data. My private phone, the burner I had bought, vibrated. It was Vivian. Her voice was perfectly placid. "Madison, we have the date," she said. My breath stopped. "The firm just sent out an internal bulletin. They are holding an emergency executive board meeting this Wednesday at 2 p.m. to finalize the GDK media transfer, the one he's giving to Ms. Pierce." I closed my eyes. Wednesday, their day. "He will be in the main boardroom," Vivian continued, her voice like ice, "with the entire board, the CFO, and his communications director. He will be at the absolute peak of his power, handing his mistress the keys to the kingdom." "That's the day," I whispered. "That's the day," Vivian confirmed. "Our server has his credentials. He will be walking into that boardroom at precisely 2:15 p.m. Wednesday morning, I woke before the alarm. At 4:30 a.m., I did not sleep. I listened to the sound of his even, untroubled breathing in the dark. He woke at 5:15, as he always did, energized and ready. Today was his victory lap. He was getting the GDK media deal approved, and he was formally handing oversight of it to Lauren. He was, in a single board meeting, consolidating his power and anointing his mistress. I watched him get dressed. He chose the charcoal gray suit, the one with the subtle pinstripe, his power suit. He whistled, a low, tuneless sound, as he selected a dark blue silk tie. He looked like the man on the cover of the magazine Young, Invincible, the absolute master of his universe. I was in the kitchen, mechanically going through the motions of making coffee. When he came in, he was all coiled energy, already vibrating at a frequency I no longer recognized. He kissed my cheek. It felt like a dry leaf brushing my skin. "Big day, Maudie," he said, adjusting the heavy watch on his wrist. "Strategy session with the board at 2, final approval on GDK. It's a formality, but it's the last hurdle." "That's wonderful, Ethan," I said, my voice the perfect, supportive monotone he expected. "Yeah," he said, grabbing the smoothie I had made him, the one I had dutifully packed with spinach and protein powder. "Then I'll probably have to swing by Lauren's. He paused. The first mistake, the first tiny crack in his perfect facade. "Swing by the communications team," he corrected. "To prep the press release. Might be late." There it was, the casual, arrogant slip. He did not even care to hide it anymore. I smiled. The soft, vacant smile I had perfected over the last few weeks. "Good luck. Knock 'em dead." He gave me one last, distracted look. "Right, thanks." The second the garage door whined shut, I pulled out the small, cheap burner phone I had bought for cash. I sent a single text message to the number Vivian Marsh had given me. It contained 2 words, "He's in." I did not go to work at Healthway. I had called in sick. I did not stay in the glass house in Harbor Heights. I drove the old Subaru to the anonymous, high-rise apartment in Jersey City, the one leased in my sister's name. I let myself into the small, empty unit. I sat on the beige rental sofa, opened my work laptop, and I waited. At 2:05 p.m., on the 41st floor of the Callaway Equity Partners building, the meeting began. The boardroom was Ethan's temple. It was a glass box, cantilevered over Park Avenue, the city sprawling below as a testament to his ambition. The table was a single, 30-foot slab of polished black obsidian. At the head sat Arthur Sterling, the chairman, a man whose family money was so old it was practically invisible. Around him sat the board, the CFO, the other partners, and Grant Holloway, the COO, who looked nervous, as he always did. And at the front of the room, standing beside a massive digital display, was Lauren Pierce. She was in her element. She wore a severe, immaculate white dress that looked almost military in its precision. She was radiant, confident, in complete control. She was presenting the communications strategy for the GDK Media acquisition. This was her coronation. Ethan sat at the chairman's right hand, the prodigy CEO, the conquering hero. He smiled at her presentation. This was his moment. At precisely 2:15 p.m., there was a sharp, professional rap on the heavy glass door. The assistant, seated outside, frowned. The meeting was not to be disturbed, but the man at the door was insistent. The assistant opened it a crack, and the man spoke, his voice polite but firm. "I apologize for the interruption. I have a court-mandated delivery for Mr. Ethan Callaway. It requires personal service." The room went silent. Lauren's presentation stopped mid-sentence. Ethan looked up, his expression one of pure annoyance. "I'm in a board meeting," he snapped. "Take a message. It can wait." "No, sir," the man said, his voice flat, projecting perfectly into the hushed room. He stepped past the assistant, into the boardroom. He was unremarkable, dressed in a plain dark suit, holding a thick 9x12 manila envelope. "Are you Ethan Callaway?" All eyes were on Ethan. He was furious at the breach. "Yes. What is this?" The man walked the length of the obsidian table. He did not look at the chairman. He did not look at Lauren. He placed the envelope on the table, directly in front of Ethan. "You have been served," he said. Then he turned, walked out of the room, and the glass door clicked shut, sealing them inside with it. For a moment, there was only the sound of the HVAC system. Ethan stared at the envelope. On the corner, the return address read, Marsh Legal. He did not recognize it. He probably assumed it was a nuisance suit from a crank investor. He shot an apologetic, "Can you believe this?" look at the chairman. "My apologies. Arthur, gentlemen," he said, forcing a light laugh. "Let me just dispose of this." He tore the seal. He slid out the contents. It was not one page. It was a stack, thick as a book, over 100 pages. He read the cover sheet, the one I had pictured in my mind for weeks. Supreme Court of the State of New York. Summons and complaint. Dissolution of marriage. Plaintiff Madison Diaz. Defendant Ethan Callaway. I was not there, but I had run this simulation 1,000 times. I could see the blood draining from his face. A sudden, sick, grayish-white pallor. His eyes flickered down the page, then to the next. He was not just seeing the divorce filing. He was seeing the appendices. He was seeing Appendix A financials, the hidden American Express statements, line by line. He was seeing Appendix B, itemized dissipation of marital assets, the charge for $6,500 from Maison de Clara Jewelry, the 2.5 years of day-use charges from the Marlowe Hotel. He was seeing Appendix C communications, the transcribed, time-stamped text messages from the burner phone. "Maudie won't make a fuss. She needs the house." He was seeing Appendix D, photographic evidence, the selfies from Miami. The room was a vacuum. No one moved. Lauren Pierce stood frozen by the presentation screen. Her moment of triumph vaporized. Then, the whisper. It came from a board member, a woman who ran a major pension fund, the same woman who had complimented my dress at the summit. His wife, she murmured to the man next to her, just loud enough to be heard. That was his wife at the Crestline, the pretty, dark-haired one. Not her. The whisper was a cannon shot. The entire board understood. This was not a private, messy divorce. This was a public, strategic execution. They were looking at a CEO who had not just cheated, but had systematically lied, had embezzled marital funds, and had brought his mistress to their most important investor event and passed her off as his spouse. Only to have his actual wife appear. They were looking at a man with catastrophic judgment. They were looking at a massive, untenable risk. Ethan looked up, his eyes wild, desperate, landing on the chairman. This is a mistake, he stammered, his voice cracking, all his power gone. It's a misunderstanding. My wife she's confused. It's a shakedown. But Lauren Pierce was not looking at him. She was staring at the papers in his hand, which he held in a white-knuckled grip. She could see her own name. She understood, in that sickening instant, that she was not just the mistress. She was Appendix B. She was the named recipient of the dissipated assets. She, the senior director of communications, had just been publicly, irrevocably named as the center of a reputation-destroying, CEO-level scandal. Her entire job, the one she was just being given, would now be to manage the crisis of herself. Her face was the color of chalk. The chairman, Arthur Sterling, placed his large, liver-spotted hands flat on the obsidian table. His voice was quiet, but absolute, cutting through Ethan's pathetic defense. "Ethan," he said. Ethan stopped, his mouth open. "The board will need a moment," Arthur continued, "to discuss this new information. Internally, it appears to be a matter of significant corporate governance and, of course, risk management. It was the most brutal the corporate execution. He did not yell. He did not accuse. He simply changed the agenda. Grant," the chairman said, looking at the COO, "please escort Ethan to his office. We will call him when we are ready." Ethan just started, uncomprehending. "Arthur, please, I can explain." "Now, Ethan," the chairman said, his voice dropping an octave. It was over. Ethan stood, the papers clutched in his hand. He was no longer the prodigy CEO. He was a contaminant. He looked at Lauren, a desperate, pleading look. She would not meet his gaze. She was staring at the floor. Grant Holloway, his face pale, stood in motion to the door. Ethan Calloway, the king of the 41st floor, was escorted out of his own boardroom like a disgraced subordinate. In the small, beige apartment in Jersey City, my laptop chimed. A new email. It was from Vivian. The subject line was empty. The body contained 4 words. Service complete. Boardroom. Full audience. I closed the laptop. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief. I felt a cold, quiet click, like a file drawer sliding shut. The data collection was over. The action phase had begun. A moment later, my other phone, my real phone, the one in my purse, began to buzz. I pulled it out. The screen lit up Ethan. It buzzed again, and again. A frantic, desperate, incessant call. I looked at the name. I let it ring, the vibration jarring on the cheap particle board table. Then, I pressed the button on the side. The screen went dark. The ringing stopped. The power had changed hands. I heard the Range Rover before I saw it, its engine a low growl of rage as it tore up our quiet suburban street. He did not pull into the garage. He slammed to a stop in the driveway, the tires screeching on the expensive imported pavers. The car door was thrown open with a violence that echoed in the silent, oversized house. The front door burst open. He was not the calm, collected CEO. He was a force of pure, chaotic humiliation. I was waiting for him. He stormed into the dining room, the place where we were supposed to host polite, strategic dinners. His face was a dark, blotchy red. His charcoal gray power suit was rumpled, his silk tie yanked loose and clutched in his right hand. crushed into a deformed ball, was the thick sheaf of papers, my papers, the summons and complaint. "Madison!" he roared, his voice cracking. "What the hell did you do? At my company in front of the board. Are you insane?" I did not stand up. I sat at the head of the massive, polished, mahogany table, a single cup of black coffee in front of me. I had not been crying. I had been organizing. In front of me, laid out in a precise, damning grid, was my own copy of the evidence. It was not crumpled. It was pristine. The separate Amex statements, organized by date, the color-printed photographs from the burner phone showing him and Lauren in Miami, the timeline of his late nights cross-referenced with the hotel charges from the Marlowe, and one new item, resting on top a printout of the internal email he had sent Lauren, inviting her to the investor summit, the one that designated her as E. Calloway, spouse. I looked up at him, my gaze as cold and flat as the polished table. "I did it at your company," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Because your company is the stage you used to invent another wife. It's the world where you told everyone I did not exist. So, it seemed like the only appropriate place for you to finally meet the real one." His rage sputtered, replaced by the frantic, calculating panic of a financier whose numbers do not add up. He saw the grid of evidence. He saw my calm. He instantly, instinctively, shifted tactics. This was a negotiation now. Okay, he said, holding up his free hand. Pacing. He dropped the crumpled papers on the floor. "You're angry. I get it. You made your point. You embarrassed me." He ran his hands through his hair. "Listen to me. Madi, we can fix this. We can settle this. Privately. You don't have to do this. You'll get the house. You'll get money. Real money. Whatever you want. Just call off your lawyer. Do not destroy my career over this." I almost laughed. It was the exact response I had predicted. He still thought this was a transaction. He still thought I was the woman who needs the house. I did not say anything. I simply tapped my finger on the cover sheet of my copy of the filing. "Read it, Ethan," I said. "You clearly didn't get past the first page." He stared at me, confused. "Read the filing," I insisted. "Read the claims." His eyes dropped to the papers on the table, scanning. I watched his face change as he read the legal language. Dissipation of marital assets. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Fraudulent misrepresentation. Public embarrassment. "This is insane," he whispered. "Public embarrassment. You can't. This won't stick." "It doesn't matter if it sticks, Ethan," I said. "It's public. It's on the court docket. It's attached to every single piece of evidence. The investors don't need a verdict. They just need the filing. You've already lost." "Madi, please," he tried, his voice softening, attempting that old, intimate tone that used to work. "I messed up. I know. I don't know what I was thinking, but don't do this to us." He was still trying to find the wife, the soft one, the one who managed the home calendar, so I erased her for good. I reached for my phone, which was sitting next to my coffee. I pressed play on a voice memo. His own voice, slick and arrogant, filled the silent, cavernous room, the voice from the burner phone. "Madi won't make a fuss. She needs the house." I tapped the screen. The next recording played. "Madi isn't ambitious. She's not like you, Elle. She just likes stability. She's happy in Jersey." He stopped breathing. He stared at the phone as if it were a snake. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sick, grayish-white. This was not just evidence of an affair. This was evidence of his contempt. He understood, in that second, that I had not just seen his lies, I had heard his truth. He collapsed into the chair opposite me, the fight gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic attempt to deflect. "It was Lauren," he whispered, his eyes on the table. She pushed this. She's ambitious. You know how she is. She was the one who was aggressive. I'm the CEO. People, People come on to me all the time. I let it get out of hand. He was blaming her, the woman he was promoting an hour ago, the woman he was building a life with. He was throwing her under the bus to save himself. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting him sit in his own cowardice. That's a very interesting defense, Ethan, I said, my voice clinical. You should see if it works. What? He looked up, confused. You should see if that defense works on your board, because while you were racing home to yell at me, my lawyer, Vivian Marsh, was placing a call to your head of human resources, and also to your chief risk officer. His eyes widened. That, finally, was the blow he understood. This is no longer a divorce proceeding, Ethan, I said, leaning forward. It's a corporate governance crisis. Vivian informed them that Callaway Equity has a massive problem. A CEO, in a fiduciary position, has been carrying on an undisclosed multi-year relationship with a direct subordinate. No, she's not. She's your senior director of communications. Ethan, you report to the board. She reports to you. You were in the middle of handing her oversight of a multi-million-dollar asset. You used corporate funds, that Range Rover, to facilitate your affair. You used corporate events, like the summit, to present your mistress as your wife, creating massive brand and investor risk. You lied to me. You lied to your partners. You lied to your investors. I ticked the points off one by one, my voice never rising. As we speak, I said, your HR department has opened a full internal review into your relationship to protect the firm and its investors from the inevitable lawsuits, not from me, from the shareholders. He just stared. He was seeing it, the career, the reputation, the image. The man on the cover of the magazine, all of it, all of him, turning to smoke. He had not just lost his wife, he had lost his company, he had lost his mistress, who was now his co-defendant in an HR investigation. He had lost everything. Mahdi, you can stop this, he stammered, his voice a child's. Call them, tell them, it's a lie. Tell them you were just angry. We can fix this. I stood up. The conversation was over. No, I said. I can't. This is your data. Ethan, I just analyzed it. You're the one who created it. I walked to the entrance of the dining room. He was still sitting there, a broken man at the head of an empty table. You have 5 days to get your personal items out of this house, I said, my voice final. My lawyer has already filed an emergency motion to freeze our joint accounts and your access to the credit lines. You will not touch a single dollar of our money. Madison, where am I supposed to go? He whispered, looking around the glass box he loved. I don't care, I said. From this moment on, you will have no contact with me, none. Any and all communication will go through Vivian Marsh. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. I paused at the door and looked back at him. He looked small. You thought my world was limited to booking caterers and picking out paint colors, I said. You thought I only knew how to cook and decorate. You forgot what I actually do for a living. I let the words land, hard and sharp. You forgot that I know how to calculate probability. I know how to read the data. And today, Ethan, the probability of your downfall hit 100%. The summons came from Vivian, not Ethan. Callaway Equity Partners, via their terrified general counsel, had requested my presence through my lawyer at an emergency. All hands on deck board meeting. They were scrambling. The filing had landed like a bomb, and the shrapnel had hit the entire 41st floor. My divorce was no longer a private matter. It was, as Vivian had so perfectly engineered it, a key man risk event involving an undisclosed internal employee relationship. This time, I did not wear the consignment blazer. I wore the black silk dress from the summit. I walked back into that cathedral of glass and steel. But I was not a wife with a bakery box. I was a plaintiff. Vivian Marsh walked beside me, her heels clicking an ominous rhythm on the marble. We were not stopped. We were met by a panicked-looking junior executive who escorted us directly to the express elevator. When the doors opened on the 41st floor, The atmosphere was funereal. We were shown into the boardroom, the glass box. It was full, the entire board, the CFO, the firm's legal counsel, and at a small, subordinate chair halfway down the table, pushed away from the center, sat Ethan. He was not the CEO today. He was a man on administrative leave, flanked by a lawyer I did not recognize. At the far end of the table, as far from Ethan as physically possible, sat Lauren Pierce. She was not the confident presenter. She was not the anointed successor. She was pale, drawn, and looked utterly terrified. She was there to be questioned. Arthur Sterling, the chairman, sat at the head of the table. He looked old, tired, and furious. As Vivian and I took our seats directly opposite the chairman, in the position of power I saw the other board members, the woman who ran the pension fund, the investor from Texas. They met my eyes, and the recognition was instant. This was her, the real one, the one in the black dress, the one he had lied about. Ms. Diaz, Mrs. Marsh, the chairman began, his voice a low rumble. We are gathered here to find a solution to this untenable situation. We want to express our desire to handle this matter with discretion. Vivian Marsh did not smile. She placed her leather briefcase on the obsidian table and clicked it open. Let's dispense with the courtesies. Arthur, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. You do not have a situation. You have a 5-alarm fire. And your CEO is holding the gasoline. My client is here, against my advice, as a final courtesy before this fire burns down the entire firm. She pulled out a single file. Here are the facts. Your CEO, Mr. Calloway, has spent the last 2.5 years systematically dissipating marital assets to fund a relationship with his direct subordinate, Ms. Pierce. She slid my timeline of hotel charges and jewelry receipts across the table. That is a legal matter for my client. This, she said, sliding a second document, is a matter for you. It was the guest list from the Crestline Summit. Your CEO, while in a fiduciary capacity, actively misrepresented the identity of his spouse to your key investors. He brought his employee mistress to a corporate function and passed her off as his wife. This is a fraudulent misrepresentation, not just to my client, but to your partners. It demonstrates a catastrophic lapse in judgment and exposes this firm to ridicule and, more importantly, shareholder lawsuits. The board members shifted, their faces hardening. This was the language they understood. Not love, not betrayal, risk. My client's divorce, Vivian continued, her voice like ice, is now intrinsically, publicly tied to the reputation of Calloway Equity. If this firm does not formally, immediately, and publicly separate itself from Mr. Calloway's actions, we will be forced to name Calloway Equity Partners as a co-defendant in our civil suit for damages. A bomb had gone off. She had threatened the firm. She had threatened their money. The chairman turned his gaze, not to Ethan, but to Lauren. His eyes were cold. Ms. Pierce, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. We have reviewed the building's security logs. Our protocol is explicit. All non-executive personnel must be logged and escorted to the executive floors. And yet, our logs show you arriving every Wednesday at approximately 1 p.m. and proceeding directly, unescorted, to the 41st floor. Can you explain why you were granted a level of security clearance reserved for the CEO himself? Lauren was trembling, her hands clasped in her lap. Mr. Calloway and I had standing strategy meetings. He gave me clearance for efficiency. We have no record of these strategy meetings on any corporate calendar. Ms. Pierce, the CFO interjected, his voice sharp. We only have a record of your day-use charges at the Marlowe, which mysteriously align with these meetings. She had no answer. She had tied her career to his power, and his power was gone. She was exposed. This was my moment, the final piece of data. I leaned forward. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet. but it commanded the room. She was not just bypassing security for a meeting, I said. Every head in the room, including Ethan's, snapped toward me. She was being auditioned. I reached into my own file. I pulled out the single, clean sheet of paper, the email from the burner phone. I did not slide it. I placed it gently in the center of the table. That is a printout of an email from Mr. Calloway to Ms. Pierce. He sent it from a secondary phone. I believe the line you'll find most relevant, I said, meeting the chairman's gaze, is the one near the end. Arthur Sterling put on his heavy reading glasses. He picked up the paper. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air moving through the vents. He read the line aloud, his voice dripping with utter contempt. Once the board warms up to you as my wife, the transition will be easier. A collective, sharp intake of breath. It was the kill shot. This was not a moment of passion. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, long-term, corporate-level conspiracy. He had not just lied to me, he had used them. He had used the board, his investors, and his entire company as props in his scheme to replace his wife. The board was done. They looked at him with open disgust. He had not just embarrassed them, he had implicated them in his fraud. Ethan, the chairman said, his voice flat. The board finds that your judgment is catastrophic. Your actions, your deception, your arrogance represent an existential threat to this firm and to our fiduciary duty. We will be moving, immediately, to terminate your position as CEO, pending a full clawback investigation of your compensation. Ethan finally, truly, broke. He shot up from his chair, his own lawyer too slow to stop him. The facade of the calm financier shattered, revealing the desperate, spoiled man underneath. "No!" he screamed, his face a mottled purple. He was not looking at the board. He was staring at me. You did this. You're trying to kill my career. After everything I gave you, the house, the money, you're trying to destroy me." I looked at him, the man I had once loved, the man who had analyzed my weakness and concluded I would need the house. I felt nothing, no rage, no triumph, just the quiet, cold click of a calculation completed. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice calm, the quietest in the room. "I'm not trying to kill your career." I paused, letting the words settle. "I just want it to reflect the truth, and a career that was built on lies," I said, looking from his face to Lauren's, "deserves to collapse from the truth. That is just cause and effect." "Get them out," the chairman barked to the guards standing by the door. He did not mean me. Security personnel, large men in dark suits, stepped forward. They moved toward Ethan, and then toward Lauren. "Mr. Calloway? Ms. Pierce, you'll come with us." Ethan stood, frozen, his mouth open. Lauren let out a small, quiet sob. The board members were already turning away, shuffling their papers, dismissing them, as if they had already ceased to exist. The glass door slid shut. They were gone. I was left in the room, me and Vivian, and the silent, powerful people who ran the company. For the first time, I was not on the outside. I was the one left sitting at the table. Vivian slowly gathered our papers, a small, satisfied smile on her face. I stood up. I did not look at the chairman. I did not need to. My work here was done. We walked out of the boardroom. We walked past Ethan's office, its glass walls now dark. We rode the elevator down to the lobby. I crossed the marble floor, the cavernous, silent space that smelled of sandalwood and leather, the place where, a lifetime ago, a polite receptionist had looked at me with pity, the place where I had been told, "Mrs. Calloway just left." I pushed through the heavy, revolving glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk, into the bright, sharp noise of the afternoon. That building, and the man I had left broken inside it, no longer had the power to tell me who I was. "Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and give that hype button a tap so more people can hear this story.